lots of fossils all over the world, zillions of them, things that are dead. We should find layers of coal and natural gas and oil from the plants and animals that were buried in this flood. We should find sedimentary rock over most of the earth. We should find fossil seashells on top of major mountain ranges all over the world. That's a prediction, which obviously is true. I mean, everybody knows, and that's the way it is. So I think that's a reasonable prediction from Genesis. You mentioned about Noah taking species on the ark. I didn't use the word species, and he didn't use the word species, and God didn't use the word species. God says two of every sort and two of every kind. Sorts and kinds are the only words used to describe these animals. So your whole effort seems to be to try to box somebody into a corner to make a definition of kind, when you're not willing to do that on species. And then if somebody did make a definition of kind, like I said, okay, if I had to, I would say probably more like a family, you will then devote enormous amounts of research to determine how that could be wrong, and yet you won't devote the same amount of research to study how your idea could be wrong of evolution. It's very one-sided here. It seems to be more anti-creation than it is pro-science. I would point out, as far as the bottleneck of coming through Noah's family at the flood, all of us coming from a rock is an enormous bottleneck, which is what the evolutionist ultimately believes. We all came from a single common ancestor. You talk about a bottleneck, that's just simply not possible. You mentioned about the carbon dating. You may be aware that when Richard Leakey found the skull, KNM ER 1470, found 1972, it looked like modern humans, but it was found under the KBS tuft. Now, the KBS tuft had already been dated by potassium-argon dating from Nature magazine, April 18, 1970, page 226. It had been dated at 212 million years old. This date had been verified several different ways. Everybody accepted the date of the KBS tuft at 212 million years old until they found the human skull underneath. The only way they knew the potassium-argon date was wrong was the fossils didn't match the theory. So evolution, assumption, was the driving force to change the date of the KBS tuft. It was dated numerous times. There's quite an article about it in here. 10 samples were dated and ranged from 0.52 million to 2.64 million, a wide range of dates, and there's all the data right here. I'll be glad to I'll let you see this afterwards. So I think it'd be a false characterization to say that carbon dating is consistent or that anything about it is consistent. The theory of evolution and the assumption of how old the thing should be based on the layer it's in, that drives the consistency, because only the dates that agree with the theory are published. Well, that's not science. That's they did the same thing in the Soviet Union. Find a teacher 10 years ago, and get a teacher and put him in the Soviet classroom 10 years ago, have him stand up and say, boys and girls, I don't think communism works. I think capitalism is a better theory. What would happen to that teacher? Well, he'd be shoveling snow in Siberia if he survived. And I would be willing to make a prediction that if a teacher in this university stood up and said in their class, I don't think evolution, the macroevolution, is a reasonable theory. I think it's never been observed. It's purely a religion. I think creation's a better explanation for how we got here. He wouldn't be shot or go to Siberia, but he'd probably lose his job.
I would be willing to bet the $10,000 you have on the table that wouldn't happen if the faculty member had tenure. Even if he didn't, it simply wouldn't happen.
Are you familiar with Dean Kenyon at Stanford University? Dean Kenyon wrote books about evolution. He was a strong supporter of evolution. He got converted and became a creationist. He wrote the book of Pandas and People. They tried to fire him, but he was already tenured. Stanford University, they made him a lab assistant. Call Dean Kenyon and ask him if there's any prejudice against creationists. 10,000.
Do I get time to?
If you wouldn't mind, I'd just like to
give
give
15 seconds.
All right.
Which again is, I caution you to check the factoids always, mine as well as Kent's. And I would be willing, I'd be interested in talking to Dean Kenyon if you'll give me his phone number, or email, or address.
Sure. And I can give you a list of others who've been censored over creationist teaching. But anyway, let's take some of the questions.
A couple questions from the audience. And once again, just so that we can get a couple of these through, we'd like to ask that you limit your answers to about 3 minutes. The first question is directed to Dr. Hovind. The question is that you keep stating that evolution is a religion. In order to help explain this, could you please give us a definition of religion and explain how evolution fits into this definition.
I would say a religion, by that I mean something you have to believe in without any empirical scientific evidence. I guess I would contrast science, things that we can observe, test, demonstrate, with religion as in something we have to believe in, but you cannot see it or observe it, for instance. So I guess that may be a loose definition of religion. Webster's dictionary definition is, a religion is belief in a divine creator or creators that brought the universe into being. So the evolution theory is a belief in how the universe came to be. So it fits all the criteria of a religion with the Webster's dictionary definition.
Dr. Moore, our response perhaps at why it is not a religion?
The theory of evolution by natural selection is not a religion because it's falsifiable. And it has, even beyond that, it is a valid scientific theory in that it has withstood numerous tests of its falsifiability. I can conceive of data right now that we might gather that would convince me that, or would in effect falsify the theory, and it would have to do with finding this pervasive pattern of homology among genes. Again, when the molecular era, the era of molecular genetics dawned on us, it was conceivable that we would begin to look at genes and that we would find that there was no pattern of relatedness among them. And if that had been the case, I would have given up the idea of evolution immediately. And I want to mention another point that we really should talk about and we haven't, and that is what empirical evidence is. It seems to me as there's an abundance of empirical evidence, not only for macroevolution, but for the connection between macro and microevolution. And so in order to say that macroevolution is not a science, or that it's a religion, we need to find out what the empirical evidence is.